for this conversation, really just as a follow-up to that webinar. It was really successful. I think we had about 120 people registered, maybe 80 or 100 that attended. And as we went through, I don't think we really had an opportunity to answer questions and really dive in a little bit deeper. So rather than sort of a broadcast webinar format, Leanne and I thought we would just make ourselves available really more for just a fireside chat, tales from the trenches, questions and answers, and really even wanted to open it up. I see some folks here, some names I recognize, and so want to just encourage really any sort of open conversation if you folks are comfortable with it. And I think with the end goal of just how can we get more of our stories told? A lot of us have really great brands. We really have a good mission for our organization. We want to make sure that those stories get told, and sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't, and sometimes for the right reasons, and sometimes for the wrong reasons. So thought we would just sort of open it up to some of the questions that folks might have, especially those that are relevant to their broader organization. If there were points of view and perspectives that folks had from their experience, either as journalists, editors, public relations practitioners, anything else that you'd want to add to the conversation, or things that we didn't cover, want to open that up as well. So feel free if you'd like to put something in the chat. If you'd prefer to turn your camera on, just like Michael's doing, welcome, and really just sort of open up the conversation a bit. Happy to play Q&A, stump the speaker, but really just here to keep that conversation going and share best practices and help where we can. Michael, I saw you sort of pop up first and unmute, so I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Michael Hanairo, and I'm the head of communications at the Francis Young Tang Teaching Museum and Art Gallery at Skidmore College. And I guess the main question I have is thinking about the difference between an organization that has to promote its own, on its own channels versus turning to the media. And when is there a moment where we scoop the media and make our outreach irrelevant if we already post things on our website and stuff? So this is an ongoing conversation we have at the Tang, like when do we reach the media? When do we put it on our website? When do we post it on social? And it depends on lots of different factors and what the thing is. But I'm just wondering if other people have that, come up with that issue and how they deal with it. Thanks.
Paul, can I take this one? It's all, social media has obviously changed, everything. It's changed how we execute all of our coverage and how we execute our communication with the public. And but the tried and true, theories still remain the same. If we want something to be new and we want the news to cover it, we don't really want to spill the beans on other channels ahead of time. If it's big enough, it's visual enough, and maybe some targeted outreach to the media ahead of the announcement instead of waiting for the actual day, can kind of help build that momentum. And then you've got your general base and your followers who are tuning in on social media after it's already been covered in the news. That would be my modus operandi. I would let the news know about it first, because if it's already out there and it's not new anymore, we kind of lose that whole saleability of the idea and the story itself.
Yeah, I'll kind of build on that and maybe slightly, well, I'll agree and offer even a opposing viewpoint to it.
You can disagree.
So Leanne's point, if it's not new and fresh, then the news isn't as excited about it. The news doesn't have any obligation to cover any of our stories, and yet you want to build up your own social media following. So I might be more inclined to follow you if I know I'm going to learn about something first, hear about something first, get an exclusive point of view, maybe be the first one to buy tickets to an event or an opening or something else like that. So I think you asked a really good question. When do you want mass appeal? Hey, everybody, this is happening over at the Tang. versus, I want to make sure that over time I've got some really good fresh content, maybe breaking a few thoughts and ideas and breaking news on my own channels first to grow those platforms over time. I guess it depends on
I think it
the
depends on
scope
what it
and
is.
level.
Yeah. What it is that you're announcing.
And certainly open up, for other folks that are here too. Don't mean to suggest that Leanne and I have all the answers. There's a lot of folks that have been around the block or been around different blocks than she and I have walked. So, really want to just turn this into a nice conversation for best practices or lessons learned or, those things.
This is Erica from Stewart's. Hi, everybody. Sometimes we find that we'll blog about something on our website and something that maybe we wouldn't even think would be media worthy, and we'll see it in the Times Union. I was like, wow, okay, well, that perhaps I should have written a press release and I would have gotten even more coverage. So we kind of go the opposite way. But we do find the media kind of scrapes our blog, and that's great, but I try to be more proactive. So I'm like, okay, how can we get this news out to as many outlets as possible and get them to tell the story? So I thought that was interesting. An example would be eggs. Last Easter for COVID, we sold like a record number of eggs because everybody was home. So they were home baking during COVID. Nobody was going out, and Easter was coming. And so we talked about the number of eggs that people are using that we sold, the number of eggs that we pick up every day from the Thomas Poultry Farm. And it created such an interest, and I wouldn't have thought to write a press release on that. So,
yeah.
And I think that's a great example of just,
though.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's, I would imagine with the Stewart's mission, primary, you want to open up, talk about new store locations and, new product launches, and we're bringing back Crumbs Along the Mohawk, right? Please, yes. But, those are kind of really interesting things. I think Leanne always, even when she was the assignment editor that I was pitching, I would find myself, often saying, hey, I've got the story angle. And she's like, yeah, but come on, Paul, it's got to have eyebrows. Like, where is somebody going to find this thing really interesting? And I think for the general public to know and hear those little factoids, and especially because it has local impact, I think is really interesting. I heard something at one point, and sorry, I'm going to paraphrase it, and it was a couple of years ago, but like, Stewart sells more coffee than Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks combined, or something like that. And it was maybe true, urban legend, whatever it was, but it was just one of those really interesting things that people go, wow, I didn't know that. And I think that moment of surprise, that gap between what I thought I knew and what I just heard, is really where a great story lives. And do you guys sell more coffee than everybody? Oh, you're muted, sorry.
Oh, you're muted.
Erica, you're muted. So
I don't know that we sell more coffee than Dunkin' and Starbucks because they're national brands, but maybe
oh no, I mean like in the area.
Yeah, that's probably a regional basis. Yeah. So I agree with you that those numbers, we just had an article in the TU about how many egg widgets we sell, and people find those numbers astounding and interesting. So
yeah. The press loves numbers. Any sort of statistic, any sort of comparative measurement that you can provide them, they love that. They just love numbers. And you get my $1.89 every day.
Thank you for that. I have a question.
Sure.
So we, I work at Stewart's, and there's a lot of positive news, a ton of positive news. Our partners just got their ESOP statements, and it was like almost 20% contribution of their salary. So we want to tell that story, but we also want to be sensitive to the rest of the world, that in this COVID era, New York, I just heard a statistic, we have 1 million less jobs than we had this time last year. So here we are, we're doing great, and we want to share that news, but we don't want to overstep our boundaries and become insensitive to other people that are not doing so well and maybe lost their job or didn't get, maybe their 401k is not doing well. So how do we balance that?
One thought that I have is to maybe move it from the headline down into the subhead or paragraph 2 level. Really tell the story about Stewart's values as an employer. So for folks maybe looking to just earn some income during a particular, transition, maybe there's folks that are, want a better work-life balance. Hey, I'd love to pick up a shift while my kids are in school. or on those AB days when the kids are in school, but now they're home and whatever. You know, Stewart's offers a lot of flexibility and has a set of employee values, which then even translates into things like ESOP. And we're really even excited, you know, if you need yet another reason to want to consider working with us, you know, we just recently did this at 20%. I think that gives you, you know, the message, a very parental view of just caring about your employees, and then adding the proof points as opposed to kind of leading with the boastful, you know, look how many commas we have and we gave it out, you know, kind of thing. That's my point of view. But again, you know, there's some really good talent on this call. So I really want to encourage other folks to kind of jump in and see what they think.
I think, Erica, too, you know, there's an opportunity. I know at least at the Stewart's near my house, they always have the "we're hiring" sign. You know, maybe there's a way to tell this story through a day in the life of a longtime employee. Who's the oldest one you have on your roster in age and longevity? Because old people sell, and they are adorable, and they are really great news. And
Leanne loves seniors.
I love seniors, and they're great. And I think there's a storytelling opportunity there. If you get the right reporter to really come out and you can spend the day with that person on their shift, you know, everybody, there's an older woman at my Stewart's, and I know her first name, and it's not just because it's on her name tag. I come in, she knows my son. Like, there's a rapport that you develop with these folks behind the counter, and that's a huge storytelling opportunity. And you can talk about the age difference and the age range in some of the folks, and how it fills the need in their various lifestyles, and where you can go from there. And I think, I mean, that I would love to tell that story. I think that would be great.
And Erica, they pay attention to me because, well, back when I had a beard, I looked just like Gary Dake when I had my eyeglasses on. So every time I walked in, they were like, "Uh-oh, the CEO's checking up on us." And I just kind of look around and go, "Doing a good job today, folks." And then, you know, the coffee was hot.
It's so funny. I can see the resemblance.
It's weird.
Christy did a 20 things you don't know about me on the TU, and there was literally like side-by-side photos, and it helped if I had the beard, but anyway. And so for folks just joining us, we're obviously not taking ourselves too seriously today, but really just turning this into a fireside chat for tales from the trenches, best practices, how can we help each other get stories told, you know, offer up some advice, workarounds, those kind of things. So we'd love to know what's keeping you up at night, and really want to open up. If you're comfortable, feel free to turn on your cameras and microphones, or even just put some notes in the chat for anything that you'd like to talk about.
I want to respond to Erica's question with, I guess, another question. Because I find this happens a lot with arts coverage, where, you know, we'll have something we think is a really good story, and it might get national coverage, but it'll be part of a trend story, you know. So we have an exhibition about female artists, and it becomes, you know, one example of an exhibition instead of a story about that exhibition or about any of the particular artists. And so when I think about, you know, the employment stock option plan, that I mean, to me, it's an interesting trend story as well. But I don't know, like, do you recommend that people try to pitch something as part of a trend? I mean, that might be a way to lessen the sort of the bragging bit about it. Because I know exactly what you mean, because we just got a big grant, but we didn't want to tout the grant. We wanted to tout what the grant makes possible, which are partnerships with other arts organizations. And anyway, so I'm just wondering what people think about pitching your story as part of a trend.
I think it gives it context for sure. Here's why the reporter may want to tell your story now, is because it's part of this this is what's happening nationally, and we're a good local example for it. It sort of lets them know that the story is something that other people are telling. They may want to tell the local impact or local example of that for sure. And you're right. I mean, very often, and I think we're talking about some fine lines here. You know, not being tone deaf, not announcing, "Hey, we just got a boatload of money." I was with the Children's Museum of Science and Technology, and we merged in with SUNY Poly at the time under Dr. Calieros. And that was basically taking a small nonprofit and merging it into the Death Star, his words, not mine. And it basically decimated our donor base. They were like, well, you clearly have all the money you want. You're now part of a $25 billion organization. So I loved that approach that you suggested, that less about the dollars, but more about what it is. You know, a grant from XYZ organization now allows us to hire or do these kind of things, or you know, extend these programs. That just tells the benefit rather than the, I think it tells the why, not the what. But I think it gets to the essence of really what you want to tell the story about. It's not just what your current bank account number is, but rather what you're able to do from a mission standpoint.
I think
Other thoughts?
when I was in the news, the term we use is localizing. So if there's a nationwide trend or a statewide trend, and there's a way to localize that and make it a hometown story, that's, I think, kind of what you're alluding to, where you can talk about those bigger things and then really get down to the nuts and bolts, nitty gritty of what it is that we're doing here on the local level. And that national hook, that statewide hook, is what draws in the media. And then you're able to expand. Once you get them hooked, then you can talk about what you want to talk about to deliver your messaging and have them come in and help tell your story.
Other thoughts on that? Welcome and encouraged. One of the questions that came in through the chat: how do you know if your story is given to the right reporter? And a great question. This is something I would love to kind of take us back to our last webinar on this same subject. We had Karen Terraracci from Spectrum News, Dave Lombardo from Capitol Press Room. One of the pieces of advice that they gave us, and I think this is one of the common themes, was the way to get a good story, the way to get your story told, is to have relationships with the reporters. You know, build those relationships before you need them, so that when you need them, they're already there. My point being, you'll know you gave the story to the right reporter when you give it to the right reporter. If you mail it into news@cbs6.com or whatever it is, you're not really sure that somebody got it, that they're paying attention to it, or that it got passed along to the right person. But if you have a relationship with a particular reporter, and one that's covered stories about your organization before or about that subject before, now you can send it right to him or her and say, you know, dear Mr. or Mrs. Reporter, I know in the past you've covered stories along this, you know, line or about our organization, and I wanted to follow up. I thought this might be of interest to your viewers or readers. Now you know that you're reaching the right person, that maybe they already know who you are because you've built a relationship. Hey, I just want to introduce myself. I'm the new marketing director of XYZ. You know, would love to keep in touch if you have anything you need, any background or anything I can do to help. You know, that way, once you have the story you're referring to, it kind of gets into the right hands. Other thoughts on that? How do you know your story is your story has gotten to the right reporter?
I was going to add a couple comments to that, Paul. I think, you know, obviously before you've established any sort of rapport, you know, if you're just breaking into the market and looking to find out, you've got to do some research. And, you know, Paul kind of alluded to it in his comments. You got to watch the news. I mean, we're public relations professionals. We have to watch the news. We have to know what stories people are telling. You have to know the kinds of stories and pick up on their own cues. You can tell when a reporter really enjoys the story that they're telling, and you can tell when they were assigned the story that they're telling. And I think that comes through. And so kind of picking up on some of those cues and knowing who best to target with your story will help you to develop those rapports. You know, you get a sense of like what their beat is, what they enjoy telling. And I think that's, you know, that's just kind of where you start. And then you work on building those relationships so that you can call on them at any time with, you know, a follow-up story or something that might interest them.
And even the timing of it, you know, a follow-up question to your question is, how do you know you've given the story to the right reporter at the right time?
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of folks at the Albany Business Review are pretty busy on, I think it's Wednesday afternoons, the print edition goes to bed. So catching them at 3 o'clock or 2 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon is really not the best time, but they really come up for air on Thursday morning. I think those are the right days of the week or whatever, but knowing how they like to be pitched, and in particular when they've got any of those sort of deadlines or peaks and valleys during their weeks is, I think, is also good to know. What else is keeping folks up at night?
I invite more folks to turn their cameras on too.
They weren't expecting it, so now they got to go clean
I
up the
know.
background. I did that. I got here 5 minutes early. I just had to tidy up. And
I have a
related to that,
question.
I'm making this. Oh, sorry, go ahead, please.
No, go ahead. I was just going to ask, I sat on a roundtable with Albany Business Review and they were like, don't send us a press release. We want the scoop, like pitch it to us directly. Is that the way you guys feel too? Or how do you, because we want everyone to cover it, but we of course
Yes.
want, you know, we want as much coverage as possible. But I do want,
Of course.
if it's a local story, I'll call channel 13 or channel 10, you know, but what's your advice on that?
So I would do both. Business Review just wants to cover it first. And the difference is that the Business Review has a very different demographic than general news on television and newspaper. They're very different. And so what you pitch to the Business Review should also be different. So you're not selling the same story to both. And then the different, more local, more human interest side is then what you would pitch to the local television and the local papers, whereas Business Review is going to be more focused on the business side of it, of whatever the story topic is. So I say do both, because you do want to maximize your coverage. If you have something to tell, you want everyone to be talking about it. But I think you need to be more focused on the Business Review being the business. And also they do like personal emails as opposed to like a blanket press release. They love that, you know. And all their emails are online. So if you know, and what they cover. So like, if you know you've got it in a particular vertical, just send it right to that person.
Yeah, if Leanne was out sick today, I would have said the same thing. You know, because it's relationship building. And I think either we as publicists have an obligation to, you know, help our clients tell their story as far and wide as possible. And representing an organization like Stewart's or any large organization regionally, you know, you need to maintain those relationships. And so if the Business Review scoops the Times Union, then Larry Rulison's going to get upset. And the next time you need Larry's like, well, where's my thing? And blah, blah, blah. And I like Leanne's angle of, hey, the Business Review might want this, you know, financial aspect of the story, going back to your eggs, you know, here's the, you know, quantity of those, and here's the economic impact of that. Those eggs created this many jobs, or, you know, whatever it could be. But you know, the fun story was the kids doing whatever it might have been. You know, or even having the regional opportunities. And I'll tell you, the scoop is very much it. I think sometimes Leanne and I'll send something out, or we'll get ready, we'll have this event, and then we're just scrolling Twitter just to see like who said it first, you know. And there's one TV news outlet in particular that is just lightning fast. I swear that their employee evaluations are based on who got something on Twitter as fast as possible. So
whether it's accurate or not.
Yeah, right. So yeah, it's the scoop is interesting because I worry about building those or burning those long-term bridges you're going to need in relationships. So. Any other thoughts related to that? Anybody have success or issues, you know, pitching exclusives over time? I don't know. Keep it as open as possible. What else is keeping folks up at night or wondering about the news? While we're waiting and maybe for some things to come in on the chat, or folks are thinking of a question, one thing we've been talking about is the importance of news over certainly the last year. I think were it not for the financial aspects of retail advertising, so a lot of the retail advertising dried up over the last year and has come back, but that hurt, I think, a lot of the news organizations, unfortunately, at a time when there was just more news than ever. We had social unrest, we had the pandemic, we had the election cycles, and now everybody's very much in a what next kind of mode. And people were consuming news like never before. I don't know about subscription rates, but I certainly know the hits to news websites and those kind of things were just off the charts. From a paid advertising standpoint, we've diverted a lot of client dollars into those environments, you know, and sorry if my friends from Lamar are here someplace, but when there weren't a lot of commuters, we were pushing billboard dollars into more, news environments. And I think that's also part of the reason why what we're talking about here, earned media, it really makes a lot of sense. It doesn't cost a lot to hire your PR practitioner or have your PR team doing it. And one thing we try to measure as best as possible is, well, what would the paid equivalent be to what we just did? So our client might hire us for X number of hours per month, they paid a bill, but boy, if they wanted to buy that advertising on all those different channels and in all those different publications, they would have spent 5 times what it cost to hire us. So, pushing things out, people are consuming it, and I think, in ways that they never have been before. That's at least our point of view on this. I'm curious if folks are seeing anything similar or different, in their relationships with reporters and those kind of things. We're not. It's a shy audience. It's all good. You guys weren't even expecting all this.
I'll jump in on that one. I'll take the bait. So my name is Michael R.C. Hello. For those of you I haven't met, I don't think I know anybody in the room. So this is a general hello. I'm the marketing manager at Capital Cardiology Associates here in Albany. So we're in a unique position in the healthcare field. I think to kind of start with Paul's comment about moving marketing dollars, I'm pretty sure all of us in the room that control some sort of budget or the message of our organization during the pandemic saw the shift in where that went. One trend that I've been seeing personally, and again, when it comes to media buying or placing media, I don't attempt to try to reach myself because I am not the target person for my group. So I always keep that in mind. But I really feel that one-to-one is the way to go these days when it comes to podcasting. We were pretty successful in creating a larger reach with some of our blog content about 2 years ago. Folks were looking for any story that has to do with cholesterol or fish oil supplements or heart medications. Like, people are naturally searching for this. But I think that it's always in the best interest for every brand to be perceived as the expert in their category. And a simple podcast, which nowadays, a lot of us are working remotely. I was kind of overjoyed, I guess is the word to use, to see how easy it was to set that up, and also to get kind of a rotating panel. But what you're starting to see now, I think all of us live here in the capital region. So now the news elements are starting to do that. And WNYT has been really pushing the News Channel 13 podcast with some of their folks. So there's ways to start, leveraging some of those relationships you have, because now those reporters are actually looking for longer form interview programming. And that gives you a chance to come in and kind of fill that need. So I think that's one place you could start at before you have to really start opening up the coffers and placing big ad buys to get their attention.
Yeah, and this kind of goes back to a comment that Michael made earlier, about when do I put my content in the hands of the journalists and when do I create my own content, and, do I scoop myself? And I think at the end of the day, having all that content is king, and especially, in healthcare, you've got a spectrum of consumers. You've got on one end the fix-me's. I didn't go to medical school, doc, you did. You just tell me what's wrong. I put all my faith in you. But increasingly so, folks are kind of going into the other end of the spectrum, and I'm going to date myself with this. I used to call them the Murphy Browns. This was the very empowered, educated, strong-willed personality. If anybody remembers that character, thank you. Some of you were humoring me with that. But they're folks that are going to really go out and become mini experts in their own diagnosis, especially if it's serious, if it's cardiology, if it's cancer. Those are the things where patient advocates really become. I not only want to know what the national and international experts will say, the trusted sources, but I also want to know the local intel. And if I can hear the voice of my cardiologist telling me, why I shouldn't be on keto and consuming as many eggs in a given day that I am. Sorry, Stewarts, where are you? Those are the kind of things that are going to help me build local relationships where I'm going to have traction with that issue. And no matter what it is, whether it's entertainment, whether it's even just sort of the retail products or even just the retail experiences, having your own content is great. I think the only obstacle, to your point a moment ago, it's so easy to produce. You could get a better set of microphones than I have hanging out of my ear for $60 and be able to produce your own content. And really your only limitation is just the bandwidth of your subject matter experts internally. You know, just being able to find, I would say in the case of our friends from say Tang or Stewart's, it might be a little bit easier to get subject matter experts that can say, hey, I want to talk on this particular subject. There's not, you know, you know, you don't have the folks in legal looking over your shoulder, I think, as they might in healthcare, you know. And in healthcare, well, we need to be careful what we say in terms of the treatment protocol and procedures and make sure that it's very HIPAA-rific. But I agree. I think, you know, building out your own channels is a lot of what, you know, the trend has been over this last decade. Your own social media channels, your own podcasts, these things supplement, you know, certainly the stories that the media can and has been telling. You know, it was Gutenberg that had the only printing press in town, but now we literally have our own broadcast studios. I can't imagine if this pandemic happened even 10 years ago, like, or you know, 20 years ago. I was mid-career 20 years ago, and like, holy crap, would we be faxing stuff back and forth and just on the phone all day talking to people? And you know, I'm sort of happy that it's happened, at least at this era anyway. Sorry, just going down a rabbit hole.
Well, I had another thing I wanted to kind of contribute to, is that like you and Leanne, I have a background in media as well. I was a former radio person. And there's nothing worse than when you're a morning show host and a salesperson or the general manager is like, oh, you're going to have this client come in for a segment on your morning show, and they're going to spend 2 or 3 minutes, which usually turns into 5, talking about their thing. And you're like, I can just hear my audience tuning out all over the market. Like, nobody cares about this except this person. So I always kind of take the approach of, when it comes to sharing and doing the job of being the storyteller for my brand, is I am the media's friend. I am here to give you a story angle or an idea with some suggested talking points, but I'm here to help connect you with things. So since, you know, cardiology is a very finite category, I have my cheat sheet of like heart awareness weeks, months, days that are relevant for us. And I will, you know, let our friends in the media know that, you know, for example, you know, May is going to be National Stroke Awareness Month. So here are some key things that we could share and we could talk about, besides just the boring talking points that are going to normally be kind of regurgitated in the media anyways. But kind of what Leanne was saying was, here's how we can get to that. So I know Stewart's does a great job of like National Ice Cream Day. And I was sorry, I was doing my hair while you were talking about your need, but just as someone who's always been impressed with the culture that you have in your store, I think Leanne's idea of talking to, you know, the longest serving employee would be great. But what has always impressed me, and I've always wanted to walk up and steal your people, is I'm impressed that they see Stewart's as a career path, and that the customer service skills that they're learning there, that this isn't a stepping stone move on job. Like, they are invested in that company. And I think with the push for people to learn a trade versus going to school or being able to do both, but who would expect, you know, it's not just a job at a gas station or a convenience store. It's part of being a part of this bigger organization. And I think a cool story to share would be taking people behind that, job seekers behind that, to letting them know, like, we're a company that's going to invest in you as we want you to invest in us. And that's a really unique relationship proposition that you're offering, which is why when I see your people and I'm standing in line and I'm waiting to, you know, just pay for my gas and get out, and somebody comes in and orders a milkshake and they're like, hold everything, I got to make this by hand. I'm like, how do they learn the patience to deal with that? Like, we need more people like this in customer service in other places. So I think that that's another angle that you could kind of tell as well.
Michael,
Yeah,
I was just gonna, oh, go ahead, Paul.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, Michael, so I'm a huge Heart Association supporter. So I'm all about all of these awareness days. But I was going to suggest for Stroke Awareness Month, you know, a lot of these awareness campaigns, they're talkers and they read well in the news, but they have more longevity in the news when we have characters that help tell the story. And so, you know, if you have a stroke survivor, you know, and in Erica's case, her character is her employees, you know, having those characters available to help tell the story for you instead of us or our presidents or the talking heads. You know, no one wants to hear from us.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, somebody had brought up like equipment that they had purchased or something that's really special and unique to your organization. Like we purchased the first ever, heart scanning, PET scanning, imaging diagnostic equipment here, which really only appeals to a small little group of people that need that service. So how do we tell that story and get everybody else excited about what we're doing? And it's the real part of it is like, hey, we're investing in this medical treatment so that you don't have to go to Buffalo or New York City to get this important heart scan. So I think as our job as the storytellers is how do we go from, what makes it unique to us and how can we shine the spotlight to just kind of step outside of it for a little while so that everybody else gets what's neat about it too.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just did. It's funny. I have a couple really relevant examples to that, to your PET scan. You have a piece of new technology, and to be blunt, nobody cares about it because everybody else has something very similar, and Albany Med might have 5 and you have 1, but yours is the newest model, but only by 6 months. And how do you get to the public to pay attention to that? We had our friends at Ellis got one of the newest robotic surgery kits, tools. And it was new and it was a little bit different and special, but everybody has one. And so the question was, how do we tell that same story? And we ended up basically just asking, could we see if the surgeons could actually fold an origami crane, the Japanese cranes, and actually see how this thing does those really intricate little folds. And at the end of the day, what we had was this, and it was this really beautiful outcome, and it was symbolic of minimally invasive surgery and all those benefits. But it was basically taking that tool and doing something a little bit different that people might find visually interesting. And related to the PET scan, I know a few years ago, I'm still working with our friends and helping out our friends at the Albany Institute of History and Art. They actually brought the mummies over to Albany Med and brought them into the PET scans just to say, hey, wonder what we can see and learn from this. And lo and behold, they thought they had, how did this go? They thought they had 2 female mummies, slid one onto the PET scanner, and guess what, Mr. Fahey, it's a boy. And so we actually took that and sort of hid that story for a little while. And we actually had this is going back like 10 years ago at the very earliest days of gender reveal parties. So we brought a whole school group in. They were studying Egyptian culture, and kids bite into the cupcakes. Yep, blue frosting, isn't that fun? And that was an opportunity to shine a pretty bright light on not only the Institute, but Albany Med and the technologies, but a fun way to just kind of, tell that story. And I think that's one of the things Leanne always challenges me with is like, don't always come at it head on, but what is the human interest angle or what else can it do? So there was a question that came in about what if your president scoops your story on Twitter? Is it still news, if you've been scooped by Gary? And I'd say it's still newsworthy. It depends on what it is. If Gary tweets out that, we just bought Cumberland Farms, you're going to have to scramble to catch up. And I don't think that's what but it depends on, I think, the level of the story. But I don't believe that everyone that watches the news and everyone that reads the newspaper and goes to the news websites is on Twitter. So, it depends on what it is and when it's said, how big is the story, and probably it's more disruptive to you folks to say, oh, great, now I got to scramble because it's out there. I wasn't planning on sending it out until tomorrow, but you just tweeted about it tonight. And so it's probably more disruptive, feels more disruptive internally than it might, in terms of just your ability to get press coverage for it. That's my short story on it. I think there's probably some fun, and I don't know your brand well enough, but as a consumer, I know it's a very friendly brand. I enjoy going in there. I enjoy shopping there. And to Leanne's point, I know the people. You could have a lot of fun just basically saying, hey, listen, Gary, this is the 3rd time you've scooped us, and just to make a little playful example of it, could we bring you to store number 483 and just start having you scooping ice cream all day as your punishment? And so the CEO's here scooping ice cream, and just a reminder, folks, that Gary scooped us again on that story, but he's here down at, Latham location to do that. And the reason I bring that up is that was a greatest story. I'm going to go back 15 years ago, if anybody remembers this. Mark Cuban, at the time, maybe still owns the Dallas Mavericks, something. I don't know. I don't follow. Yes. Okay. Thank you for heads nodding up and down. He was in a pissing match with somebody who basically said, look, I wouldn't hire Mark Cuban to work at a Dairy Queen, much less do what he's, managing his own team. Dairy Queen called and said, we'd love to hire Mark Cuban for a day. Come on down and run our store. And we're going to give 100% of our proceeds to whatever this charity was. And he did. And it came in, and it became sort of a, press opportunity. Now, Gary scooping you on something, or maybe kind of getting a little bit ahead of the story, may not necessarily rise to that level, but it's finding those moments where you can really kind of step out of, the norm and create an opportunity where there really wasn't necessarily one, and then turned it, incredible. He could have yelled back and dropped some F-bombs and all this other stuff, but it really turned into a sort of a positive story, and so it's even looking for those moments.
I think
Let me know
too that there's a very practical approach to it as well. And this, Paul kind of alluded this to in the beginning of his answer, that there are very different viewership, readership, and demographics for every single social media channel and for every single television station and newspaper. And so just because someone heard it on Twitter, there's a great number of folks who don't have Twitter, don't watch Twitter, and literally only watch their channel 13 at night, and that's it. And so, there's still a lot of room and still a lot of opportunity to help share that story in the more classic, traditional way. But also too, that all the assignment editors and producers are all over Twitter. So you give them a call and say, hey, did you see Gary's news? Now they're like, oh shit, what'd I miss? And
Right.
then you don't even need to write a press release. You can just have a phone conversation with them right there and say, oh yeah, no, I don't know if you saw this, but we're doing blah, blah, blah. And then, he did half the work for you. And then you just call everybody down your list and say, hey, do you want to talk to anybody? Here's who I have. So you cut a bunch of those steps right out of the process. So it can sometimes help when Gary scoops you.
Yeah, that's a good point. I know
in my store anytime.
Yeah, I know a lot of reporters, Steve Barnes, Christy Gustafson, really good at just monitoring all that stuff and retweeting it. And, to Leanne's point, there's an efficiency there to just saying, hey, Christy, I was going to send you a release anyway, but rather than proofreading paragraph 5, Gary just took the work, did the work for me. So I just want to make sure you saw it though, and I think that can help. Certainly you don't want to be contradictory, like, oh, there goes the boss again. Not great for your career. And you certainly don't want that to be out in the public, but I think that could be, really interesting angle. Like, hey, I want to make sure you saw what Gary did. Give Gary his little blog, give him a little, Gary's corner.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. Make it fun, make it light, and follow up. So good advice. Thank you.
Sure. Other thoughts, questions?
I have a question for you. Sorry.
Please.
Oh, it's fine.
Pat Kennedy, and I work with the Altamont Fair as a not-for-profit Albany Schenectady Green County Agricultural and Historical Society, which is why we call ourselves the Altamont Fair. We're a not-for-profit, and one of our struggles is we have, we're more seasonal, we have certain events, and we don't have a lot of money. So we have tried to do a lot of the social media and trying to get the organic reach. We don't do a lot on Twitter. We don't get a lot of response there. It's mostly Facebook and Instagram. And we have created some wonderful relationships, although a lot of the news TV folks are moving around a lot now. A lot of the people that we've worked with are now going to different markets. So when people leave, what's the best way to try to reintroduce ourselves to the new people, or just go back to the upper level supervisory? Or do you have any thoughts there?
Leanne, why don't you take that one? You were assignment editor for more than a decade at Capital News 9, Time Warner, Charter, Spectrum, whatever it is now. YNN. I knew I was forgetting one.
We talked at one point or another.
Yes. Don't skip over the assignment editor. That's my general message, because they're the ones that are answering the phone, and they're the ones that help assign the reporters. So, when you see somebody leave and you have a new story, call the general assignment number and say, hey, I saw so-and-so left. We've done a number of stories with them. Who do you suggest I reach out to in the future? Or can you help me? We don't want to just blow off the assignment editor. They really hate that.
Muted myself. I absolutely
So
understand.
it might be, yeah, so it's just common courtesy, but also to just like a fact-finding mission, come at them at a very base level and say like, oh, do you have someone lined up to fill the spot? Is it going to be vacant a while? Then you learn a little bit about what's going on, especially right now. When COVID first hit, I was having a lot of background conversations with a lot of the local newsrooms about like, how are you guys going to do this? What are you doing?
Right.
What's going on? And so I've learned a lot about how they're changing their coverage plans and what they're doing. So, I just said to you, call the main number. You can't for Spectrum. They're not there. No one's gonna pick up. So there's and that's when the whole relationship building comes into play. Getting personal phone numbers, getting the individual email addresses instead of the news at whatever. And that, so, by having more candid conversations instead of saying like, hey, I know you only have 30 seconds, but here's my story. It's happening at 10:30. Can you help me? Then you say, hey, how's your day going? Oh my God, did you see that really big fire out in Rensselaer County? Did you guys go to that? And just having a normal conversation because they're human and they're not just automatons. And I think that will help you to get to in front of the people that you need to help tell those stories the best that you can.
Does it make sense to, again, I don't want to be a pest. I mean, we try to let people know like a week ahead of time what's happening and give them some background as to what to expect. Quite often somebody will call back and say, hey, can you do something special for me so I can come on site? And we always figure out something that we can do with people.
Yeah.
But if does it make sense to like the third day out, just send another reminder if I haven't heard from people, or is it better?
100%. Yes. I generally tell my clients that we have, and remember, I received these emails but I send them out depending on the day of the week. I will send the release out at least 3 times within a week prior. I try not to send anything more than a week ahead of time. It's just going to get lost. No one's going to flag it. No one's going to pay attention. This is news. They want new stuff. So, I will also, I don't want to give away all my secrets, but you also want to try and stagger when you send it. You don't want to send it at 9 o'clock every day. Send one in the morning, send one in the afternoon, send one on the weekend. You don't know who's receiving those emails. And eventually one of them is going to put it in your planner. And then that way, that morning, it will get brought up in the newsroom meetings.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. And I think this follow-up is relevant not only to your question, but to everybody. If you have the time and bandwidth and you can keep track of those changes in the newsroom, it's not a bad idea just to send them a quick, could even be a cut and paste email you send to everybody, but just, hi, so-and-so new reporter, just want to welcome you into the market. We're with the Altamont Fair, and if you're not from this neck of the woods, it's really kind of a big deal that first week in August, around here. Would love to show you around, tell you a little bit, free pony ride, whatever, but hey, I'll be in touch in a couple months as we get a little bit closer. Then to Leanne's point, I think you've only got one shot at this, and this is what I lived as a former marketing director for Proctor's, which is where I think I first met Michael. Lion King was only in town for a month, or Wicked was only here for a week. I got one shot at getting as many eyeballs as possible. So trying to find all those exclusive angles and just, hey, if you want to come and see the making of, you want to see what goes into this, you want to know a little bit about the economics of it. How many jobs do we create, or, whatever it could be. But I just want to let you know what's coming. Here's an email about the activities of the day. Subject line, want to go for a pony ride. If I saw that on my inbox, I'd be like, what the hell is this? Now you got my attention. Sure I do. And that's, exclusive to me while somebody else is spinning around on the other ride or something.
Food is a big,
there's a lot of
food is a big,
yeah, exactly.
Journalists are always hungry.
And your discussion earlier about seniors and young people, we've got a really good mix between seniors, young people, and animals. But you're right, it's a very concise period of time, and it's just tricky.
Yeah, and I think the newsrooms are challenged. I mean, there are fewer and fewer reporters now, in particular, I'm not even sure that the Times Union has kept up on the arts and entertainment. I know Amy Biancoli had retired. I don't know if somebody else has replaced that, but for now, a few folks are working on it. So you've got a lot that was lost when somebody like that, who'd maybe been covering it for years, enjoys covering it, always looks for a fresh angle. Just trying to rebuild those relationships, kind of reintroduce yourself. It can be, a little bit taxing, but I think, one of the themes in our last webinar and for this is just relationship building. Have that short list of folks that, you keep in touch with, that you can explore unique angles with. And I think those are relationships that'll help you over time. And, ideally that reporter goes someplace else and takes you with them, kind of Johnny Appleseed, your brand across the, all the different media outlets or whatever.
Thank you.
So about 5 or 7 minutes left. Just wanted to open it up if folks have questions in the chat or want to come off mute or tell us what's keeping you up at night. Certainly sidebar on crisis communications. If you don't feel like talking about that in public, happy to chat offline with you on those.
I wanted to add something about timing of releases, especially when it's a cultural, seasonal kind of thing. So I'm the former arts editor at the Times Union. And, I know that the Boston Symphony Orchestra sent out Tanglewood's schedule every December 15th. And I always thought this is amazing to have. And I know pre-pandemic, now is late for announcements of summer cultural things. I mean, I think it's different because of the pandemic now. And then in the visual arts, there are certain print products like Art in America, for example, where they do a year ahead look. And so there's all these different kinds of calendars that I'm always existing within and having to say, oh yeah, what is our show in summer 2022? Oh, I need to get that ready in about a month for Art in America. And then for Times Union, the thing about Times Union, everyone thinks it's a daily. So I was the former editor of the preview section, which is really a weekly within a daily, and we have a different time frame to work with. And I like to get stories 3 weeks ahead of time because the deadline for a reporter's story was always the Thursday, but was a week before publication. Mm-hmm. And so they needed that pitch a week before so we could weigh what's going on, and then let's work on that this week and we'll have it ready for next week because we need to design it. And that's usually what happens in the days leading up to the printing of it. Anyway, so there's just, I understand if it's that there could be a week before is often for very newsy stuff, makes a lot of sense. But just in the arts and entertainment zone, there's the year ahead, the 6 months ahead, the month ahead, and then the week ahead, and then the day ahead reminder that I often live or try to work with.
No, that's a very good point. And thank you. I think we were thinking, largely about the local news, but forgetting that a lot of us are in trades. So those trade journals or magazines, might have 3-month lead time, 12-month lead time. I know Leanne's got a media chart that we have of just everything, and we've got tabs for all these different verticals. And I believe that there's a column that's daily, weekly, monthly, kind of thing. But I think that's a great reminder for all of us, myself included, to remember, how far out do we pitch a story on a particular, topic to a particular outlet. So.
And I think that also goes back to the relationship building as well, so that you want to be able to send it to your arts editors well in advance, but there's still a newsy angle that you could pitch out, a couple of days ahead before something kicks off, and you can get those morning on-scene reporters, on site as you're setting up, opening up the last of the folding chairs, that kind of thing. So there's definitely 2 different audiences that would appreciate that story in a number of different ways and different angles. And, so while, we focus on the long leads for some of the broader overarching stories, try to remember too, that there is still that urgent, timely hook that you can do, in the days leading up to an event.
Yeah. Well, thank you folks for joining us. I know we've got a couple minutes before we promised to finish up right at 1. And maybe not a bad time to end meetings early. Like if you're one of these people that starts a meeting at 5 after or 5 of, like to allow somebody to take a break instead of going wall to wall Zoom all day, like I love you. So thanks for joining us. Really enjoyed the conversation. You know, we weren't sure if there would be a lot of interest based on our last webinar, but you know, even just like this sort of fireside chat Q&A, just maybe building up a small community of folks to sort of share knowledge and best practices and tales from the trenches. I'd love to do this again. So keep an eye out. We'll put something in your inbox maybe and do this again in a month or so.
I want
and with
Tales
that,
from the Trenches merch. If you guys have Tales from the Trenches merch, that'd be cool.
we do. We have Over It merch, which is like get over it. But yes, I love that. Yes, we could brand this whole thing. It's PR Tales from the Trenches with Paul and Leanne. So thanks for joining us. I'll give you guys the gift of free time a couple minutes early. If there's any other questions, you know, that you want to ask, even things that might be more sensitive with press relations, you know, happy to sidebar with you on it. Otherwise, really enjoyed the conversation. Hopefully you guys got a lot out of not only us, but other folks that bravely came off of mute and joined the conversation. So thank you. All right, with that, enjoy the rest of your day, everyone, and we'll see you back here again soon. Thanks.
Thank you.